So true freedom arises when we are free from our conditioning. Doesn't mean that the conditioning disappears. When we awaken on the level of mind, it is a freedom from being controlled by our thoughts, being led around by our thought conditioning, like a dog on a leash, where we are reacting to everything that we encounter during the course of a day or over a lifetime, just from our past experiences. It's quite mechanical in a sense. So waking up at the level of thought or at the level of the mind is recognizing that what we truly are isn't defined by what we think, isn't defined by all our concepts, our beliefs, our dogmas, all the things that we're quite certain of. It's not what defines who we essentially are. To the extent that we believe that our mental conditioning does define us, then we are caught in reactivity. Not all the time, but perhaps often enough to cause ourselves and others to suffer. So by conditioning, there's all kinds of conditioning. A lot of it doesn't cause problems. We don't complain about, I've just got too much joy in my life. I've got to do something about it. We don't complain about that kind of conditioning or that kind of experience. But, the things that hook us, the things that where we have, so-called negative emotions as a result of certain triggering incidences. Somebody says something and the automatic reaction is anger, arrogance, sense of victimization, shame, despair, whatever the pattern is. But one thing to be clear about is that those emotions are never caused by the other person. They may say something, creates this reaction within your organism, but the same person could say the identical thing to somebody else with a different set of conditioning, and they'd be just fine. It wouldn't bother them. So we can see by that what our responsibility is to take responsibility for our own reactivity. This is tricky ground right here. So when we find ourselves being caught up in negative emotions because of things that trigger us, rather than blame the other person, it is vitally important to look at the beliefs that we're holding that tell us that the other person shouldn't do that, it wasn't right, wasn't fair, whatever thought associated with that emotion happens to be. All conditioned, thoroughly conditioned. We can say to ourselves that those shouldn't be happening. I'm much too spiritually advanced for that. Or we can take them as opportunities to really look at the thoughts that we're still holding on to, that we still believe are true. So when I say this is tricky ground, that's the first part of it, is to take responsibility for our own reactivity, to own it, to know that it's totally an inside job. It's not the other person. Okay, that's the first thing to understand. The second part of it is that it's not who you are. What we can do is just watch it. Watch the reactivity and not judge it, not run away from it, not deny it. Just look at it straight on. Right? So on the one hand, I'm saying, take ownership of the reactivity. Don't blame the other person. And on the other hand, I'm saying, but it's not really you anyway. It's just all conditioned. It's just everything up till everything from the past, culture, family, religion, where you went to school, all of that leads to our current state of beliefs overall. Okay. That is as it is, and that's not going to disappear overnight. But what we can see is that whatever notices clearly, objectively, notices that conditioning isn't itself conditioned. It's like when we looked earlier at what was aware of our sensations. Was it the sensation? One thought doesn't know another thought. It may think about another thought, but no thought has self-existence. A thought isn't a sentient object, right? Just a thought. So what we can do is notice that whatever our reactivity is, whatever our conditioning is, we can just notice it with clear eyes. We're not trying to make it go away, not even trying to change it. Very important. We're trying to change it, then we've got skin in the game. We've got an objective. We've got a goal. We know how it needs to be. None of that. Just be present for. It's enough. Let the power of awareness bring light to our recognition of that conditioning. That's enough. More, much more than enough. Okay, so that's what we can do on the level of thought. We can do the same thing on the level of feeling, seeing that whatever feelings come up, there's something that notices the feeling. And thoughts and feelings are really interrelated. Often we think about them as two independent things, but a thought can produce a feeling. We can be convinced by sort of the magnitude of the feeling that the thought is actually more true, and that further amplifies the feeling, etc. So those two are related. We can see that just if we're sitting in a quiet, peaceful room early in the morning, nothing's happening, and if we just dredge up a unpleasant memory and sort of replay it in vivid color, we can get upset. We can break out in a sweat. Our heart starts beating. We can have physiological changes just by thinking a thought. That's the power of thought. Okay, so now we have thinking, feeling, but then there's an even deeper kind of identity that sooner or later we'll have an opportunity to encounter, to really look at fully. And we could call this almost existential awakening on the level of existence itself. And this is tied to our very convincing belief in the body-mind structure as an independent identity center. Everybody believes it, right? Nearly everybody. And so we can spend a lifetime trying to protect it, enhance it, enrich it, give it as many, exciting experiences and good meals and adventures and excitement as we can. But perhaps one day we may question whether that is truly what we are. If that's the entirety of what we are, then why not? Why not just go out and have a good time? Knowing somewhere deep down that all of that one day will come to an end, sooner or later. Not that much later, actually. And we might then wonder if that is actually the entirety of what we are. It's interesting that we can wake up on the level of thought, in other words, be freed from the dominance of mental control or the dominance of emotional control. Doesn't mean that we won't have thoughts and doesn't mean that we won't have feelings. Of course we will. We just won't be controlled by it anywhere near the extent that we probably once did. But this level of existential grasping is a totally different animal because it has to do with our very existence, right? Holding on to what we believe is me, right? It's not at a distance anymore. It's not a thought or even a feeling, even though they're relatively close, we can still see, okay, they're not quite me, it's me having a thought. So I'm still, we're not talking about me exactly, we're just talking about thinking or feeling close, but not exactly me. But when we're talking about our existential being, now we're talking about me, right? My existence, life and death. But this is life sort of pushing us beyond the belief that what I am is in its entirety this body mind, and only that. It's pushing us past that to allow us to see our true home by whatever name you prefer. But when we really look closely, we can ask ourselves, how do I know that I have a body? And it's the same, we only have a limited number of portals to use. We have sight, we have hearing, we have touch, taste. Sense internally, thoughts, feelings. That's about it. And that's the total in rapid succession of those capacities to perceive convinces us that, yes, there is a body mind, and that's what I am. And then it's, of course, combined with everything we learned in school and what our parents told us and what society assumes and everything. But the only way that we know that is because those perceptions, sensations, thoughts, and feelings appear within awareness. It's the only place that we actually know or are able to perceive anything, right? So we can look down at the body, we can touch the body, we can wiggle our toes, we can notice our thoughts, we can have physiological reactions in our body. And that there's something that's aware of all of that. And so a fundamental question in spirituality is that capacity to be knowingly present. Is that a capacity that's generated by the body? Or is that something that is aware of the body? Fundamental difference, right? If it's generated by the body, that too one day will cease. And this fundamental fear of living comes from the fear of not existing. It's not really the fear of sort of giving up this thought or the fear of, changing our opinion about that. It's not really tied to that. It's the fear of not existing, right? So the question is, what's subject to not existing? I mean, clearly this body is. Clearly this thought processing brain of ours is. Is there anything that isn't? And I would suggest the only possible candidate is awareness.